And Philadelphia has it.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Phaithful Phanatics show here live on DSM Media's YouTube and Twitter channels. Guys, if you are new to the channel, first and foremost, make sure to check us out on Twitter at DSM_media. Hit that follow button. We greatly appreciate it. And while you're over on the channel, make sure to check out the link tree in our bio. It will take you to every social media platform we are available on. If you guys want to be interactive throughout any of today's shows, any of our shows, if you guys want to catch any of the DSM pregame lives, they stream exclusively on the DSM Media YouTube channel. Check out the link. It's in our link tree. It'll take you directly to the YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button. We greatly appreciate it. I am one half of your host this morning, Dylan Davis. You can find me on Twitter at DylanJD98. To my left, my co-host Scotty. You can find him as well at Scotty Drown. My man, what is up on this Wednesday morning?
Happy hump day to you and everybody out there.
Yes, sir.
Just getting to it, man. Just like any other Wednesday, right here on the Phaithful Phanatics, and ready to break it all down, man. This summer's going to be interesting as we continue to surf through topics. Obviously, exactly. We have the Phillies, like they're playing 162 games, so we can't sit here and overreact every time they lose or win a game. They did lose 2 in a row, though.
They have.
We'll obviously touch
7
on
of
that.
9.
But we'll have to be very creative over the summer. So, guys, be sure to make sure you're commenting your thoughts and letting us know what you want to talk about as well. We want to make sure we stay on the trend here. So, definitely excited to be here. Nonetheless, get into it.
Absolutely, man. And the Phillies have lost 7 of their last 9 games. So we'll absolutely talk about that towards the end or second half of the show. We're going to start with the Sixers head coaching vacancy in their interview process, as they just interviewed Frank Vogel yesterday. Or was that 2 days ago? Whenever I'm losing track of time here, like in this long beginning of summer, like you mentioned. But we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the sense of urgency and the speediness the Sixers need to get through this head coaching process with, when you have other teams like the Bucks and the Suns and the Raptors and a couple of other solid vacancies out there that are looking to improve their team, right? It's funny though, you mentioned kind of the long summer, and it's like, excuse me if I'm tired this morning. It's so weird how your fandom can affect like your day to day and your sleep and how ready you are in the morning to do a show like this, because it's like when the Sixers are flying high, when the Sixers are coming out and winning Game 5 in Boston, you're ecstatic to wake up and get on the show and you're energized. And then it's like, well, no more Sixers, and they left you depressed, and now the Phillies lose 2 in a row, and it's like, well, I'm pretty tired this morning. So
pretty
we'll
drained.
work our way through it, man. But let's start with the 76ers and their head coaching vacancy. Like I said, they interviewed Frank Vogel, and of the 5 or 6 names that were thrown out there to start this interview process, I think we were both in agreement that Frank Vogel maybe necessarily wasn't the worst candidate for the job, but was the most boring, the most plain, the most blah. Kind of, that does nothing for me moving forward. That does not get me re-energized for the Sixers season and heading into their off season. What do you make of him being kind of like, we have not interviewed Nick Nurse yet, right? Or did I miss something? The report came out last week that Nick Nurse was scheduled to fly in and interview this week, but I do not recall a tweet or any post about that they had completed an interview with Nick Nurse.
I haven't seen anything confirming it, but I would assume they have had to have met with him by now. Considering
I feel like that would have been talked about and leaked, that he was thrown out there, because I bring up Nick Nurse to say, how surprised kind of are you if Frank Vogel is the first candidate to interview for this vacancy?
Well, it's funny. John Clark's report is just hilarious because he's like, Wildwood native. And I'm just like, that does not fucking matter. Do not put that into this equation. That does not matter. But it would be a little concerning for me, man, because honestly, as we've discussed coaching topics, right? The coaching candidates here, I would look in-house before I would look at Frank Vogel. I would look at Sam Cassell. I would look at Dave Yeager before I would look at Frank Vogel. you mentioned how boring Frank Vogel and how boring of a hire that would be. And, I look at him in a similar lens in hindsight as Doc Rivers, right? Doc Rivers had the one championship. He coached the great Boston Celtics team with Rondo, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett. Then you have Frank Vogel. He's the bubble champion, right? Everybody tries to discount the bubble playoffs. Well, he's the king of the bubble, right? He led that Lakers team to the bubble championship in 2020. In that case, you have LeBron and you have Anthony Davis literally at his pinnacle, right? And he's able to win the NBA championship with that squad. So, like, I look at him and Doc Rivers in the same lens. They've had, considerable instances where Frank Vogel, for instance, with the Indiana Pacers, right, had Paul George, Danny Granger, Roy Hibbert, the center position, George Hill. That was like the start of his time.
A lot of battles with Miami Braun, right?
A lot of battles with Miami Braun, D Wade, that Miami squad. And obviously it didn't turn into much for Frank Vogel, but I believe they made an Eastern Conference Finals in that stretch and stayed competitive. Then he did a stint down in Orlando where it was pretty, unidentifiable. Like, it didn't amount to much in Orlando. So I'm looking at him and Doc in very similar lenses. Obviously, Doc has a lot more success and he's been around a lot longer. But I don't like the fit. I don't like the idea of bringing him in. Is he's more of a defensive minded coach, and I'm not against defensive minds, but we want this offense to look better. So if you're counting on Frank Vogel, then I think you're counting on bringing in another offensive mind. Maybe that's where you do bring in an offensive assistant like Mike D'Antoni. But, man, the goal needs to be Nick Nurse. And then from Nick Nurse, I'm going to start at like Monty Williams and Coach Bud before I go to Frank Vogel, man. And I know it's a name thing, right? I'm not playing like a popularity contest. It's not like that. It's what we've seen be successful in the modern NBA. And that's what it is for me.
Yeah, no, I think your last point is exactly where I was going to pick up this conversation. We talked about how we want a culture changer here in Philadelphia for our next head coach. And Frank Vogel, to me, whether that's his fault or not, brings a culture of losing would bring a culture of losing, right? You mentioned the bubble championship that he has, the one ring that he has. The Lakers are 52-19 that year, but it's a LeBron James and Anthony Davis led team. Frank Vogel is not going to garner a lot of respect for winning a championship under those two guys, right? And then you look at it from outside of that point of view. He had a 56-26 year while coaching Paul George and the Indiana Pacers. Like I said, a lot of battles with those Braun Miami teams. But outside of that, he never really had a season 38-44, 45-37, 49-32 is a good year before the 56 year. Then he goes to Orlando and coaches kind of a very bad Orlando Magic team, never gets over 30 wins. Yeah. He goes to the Lakers, has the bubble championship. Outside of that, he went 42-30 and then 33-49. My point is he coached 5 years in Indiana, had a pretty good run, but had a exciting young Paul George and company, and George Hill and all those guys leading the way. And then he has a bubble ring with the Los Angeles Lakers with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. His last two coaching tenures have lasted 2 seasons and 3 seasons. Yeah. Frank Vogel does not bring a lot of winning. He doesn't. He brings a lot of, like you said, we had Doc Rivers for 3 years. Frank Vogel was at somewhere for 2 years, for 3 years. So he doesn't seem to stick in other organizations. He doesn't seem to, bring that winning tendency. And that's what you mentioned. Like, dude, Nick Nurse in his 5 years or so in Toronto had 1 losing season. 1. Yeah. 27-45 in the 2020 in the bubbles or the year after the bubble season. He had 2 seasons of 53 or more wins. He had a 48-34 win season. And last year with a Toronto Raptors team that almost made the playoffs was 500.
Yeah.
And we know the issues they had with their roster.
Frank Vogel doesn't
go down the list to Monty and Bud, and hell, you could throw Doc's name in that conversation. The 3 teams with the most wins over the last 3 seasons.
Yeah, literally. I'm glad you said that, Dylan, because you've made me think about it. I would have rather I say this I'm treading very lightly with this take, but I would have rather kept Doc Rivers than bring in Frank Vogel. I would
Yeah,
rather
I
keep
agree,
the
man. I don't
chemistry
think he
going with
brings
Doc.
in anything different.
It's the
I
same coach.
really
Like,
don't. You mentioned the defensive minded kind of coach that he is, and sure, I mean, I guess it works if you bring him in and you brought in and obviously they're not going to pair Frank Vogel and Mike D'Antoni. They just don't
right.
have a
It's
working
not going to
relationship. It's just
happen.
not going to
You're
happen. But if you
contrasting.
brought in an offensive minded assistant coach like that, maybe, I don't know, but to me, not only is it the boring move that isn't going to grab the fans' attentions, which if you're just speaking from a business point of view,
Yeah,
the
tickets.
76ers kind of need to do. And I know I don't mean that to make the splashy move and appease the fans, but after the mediocrity of the second round exit after second round exit after second round exit, to go out the way they just did against the Boston Celtics, and then to see how Boston looks against Miami right now. Obviously, they won game 4 last night, but to see that and how this has played out, it's like you need to reel this fan base back in before you
Yeah.
start to lose it.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have a very interesting offseason, whether, Daryl Morey is about to pay James Harden 4 years, $200 million. You're going to divide the fan base from that point of view, right?
Yeah.
So I think you need to make, obviously, the smart move, but also that kind of winning, splashy, attention-grabbing type of move. And Frank Vogel checks none of those boxes. It would just be a very underwhelming signing for me,
It's
and
exactly what it
he
is.
does not bring anything to the table that I'm looking for. He doesn't bring winning. He doesn't bring a culture setter. He doesn't bring an offensive mind. The Sixers were always top 5 in net rating defensively.
Yeah.
We don't need a defensive minded coach in here. We had those on the bench.
Yeah.
And lastly, like, what is he going to do for the development of Tyrese Maxey? What is
Right.
he going to do as head coach if you bring back James Harden and get more out of James Harden and Joel Embiid? He doesn't check any of those boxes.
He's not a guy that's even going to attract James Harden to come back, right? If that's what your goal is.
I can't see it.
Like, the thing with Frank Vogel for me, and you kind of went through it with his track history, is his run. And he's just not an overachiever, right? Like, he's never taken a team and said, oh, this team, maybe they are a championship contender, and then he turns them into one. He's never done that, right? Like, he went to the Lakers with AD and LeBron. Yes, he won a championship with LeBron. Congratulations. It's the second or best player of all time, literally. Right. Like, congrats, Frank Vogel. Then you go to the Pacers. That was his chance to really make his mark. Now, I understand he ran into, a Miami team that was destined, but literally we have people throwing Mike D'Antoni under the bus for losing to the Golden State Warriors
and the San Antonio Spurs
conference finals. You know what I mean? And the San Antonio Spurs. So, it's an interesting topic. Frank Vogel is much too boring for me, and I just don't think he would bring much change, like innovative and creativity to this team, and that's what we're looking.
I think that's the biggest thing, because sometimes boring could be good for a setting like ours, right, and a vacancy like ours.
It's been boring,
but I will say, like, he's boring on all levels. Like, this isn't, Frank Vogel, the name, the personality, the coaching style, the leadership, how he's going to speak to the media. That's all boring, but so is his track record. You know what I mean? It's not like Nick Nurse might come off as somewhat boring. He might come off very analytical, but Nick Nurse builds winning tendencies. Nick Nurse had one losing season in 5 years with a Toronto Raptors team that had no stars outside of Kawhi Leonard for 2 years.
And I think what you said, about just the development factor as well, it just has no history of developing players, right? Now, you could say develop Paul George, but did Paul George just become that? You know what I mean? Like, did he develop Paul George? Was Paul George just meant to be an all-star caliber player? Like, these are the things that I'm looking at, and I agree with you, man. There's just so many better options when you think about track records of even being a former player, right? Like, you mentioned Maxey and his development. That's going to be key going forward here. It is interesting. Right. Obviously, Frank Vogel has dealt with AD. He's dealt with Roy Hibbert. Obviously, it would be Embiid. So he has a history with big guys. But I don't know, man. It's just not very appealing to me in all reality.
I know nothing about Frank Vogel's history on the offensive end. That's the issue.
That is the problem, yeah.
And, like, what is Frank Vogel going to do to help Tyrese Maxey? Like, Sam Cassell can help Tyrese Maxey.
Yeah.
Any of these other guys, Monty Williams, Mike Budenholzer, Nick Nurse, they can help Tyrese Maxey. They can get the most out of James Harden. They can draw something else up with with Joel Embiid as the focal point. Yeah. What is Frank Vogel going to bring to the table offensively? Mike D'Antoni, right? What is Frank Vogel going to bring offensively to the table for this 76ers team? I don't know. I don't know. Like, maybe I need to go back and watch some film with his offense with LeBron and AD as the focal point and see what it looked like. But I mean, I think the records kind of tell you all you need to know. Outside of a bubble season,
yeah,
he had mediocrity with the second best player of all time.
Gets canned. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, like, what does that mean? Like, yeah,
right.
I'm not a fan.
And LeBron and GM LeBron didn't want him back apparently. So because I mean, he signs off on everything over there.
Signs
so
off on everything. Nothing happens without
he
LeBron.
Didn't want him there anymore. So what does that really kind of say? He brought in Darvin Ham for Christ's sake over Frank, like
with no coaching experience,
right? So we'll see, man. The one more thing about this coaching, vacancy interview process. Brett brings up this point of Nurse is already listed as a finalist for a bunch of other teams, the Bucks, the Suns already. How quickly do you think the Sixers need to sift through this pool of candidates and this whole process? Because, man, like, I know you don't want to rush it, and I know you want to give each guy their opportunity, and you want to make sure you went through the due process and, kind of got all your eggs in one basket here and pick out the best one. But it's like, if Nick Nurse is going to get a phone call in 6 days from the Milwaukee Bucks, you better figure this out now. Nick Nurse better interview tomorrow, and you need to offer him a contract if he is the guy. So how quickly do you think they need to take care of this, pool of candidates?
Yeah, I mean, from the pool of rumors that have came out in the last few days, it feels like they need to do this very urgently if Nick Nurse is the guy. I did see a report earlier this morning. I can't remember. I was just trying to find it on Twitter before we went into this segment, but it said that there's a feeling around the Sixers organization that they want Nick Nurse to be their guy. If they want Nick Nurse to be their guy, they're going to have to act quickly. Sure. I would say if they have brought him in for an interview already, they did that very under the radar and kept that very closed in for nobody to know. Mind you, we didn't hear about Frank Vogel until after he interviewed yesterday.
Sure.
That was even kept very on the low as well. But you've seen the reports. I mean, the Suns have put him in their top 4 coaching candidates that they've dwindled down to. The Bucks have put him into their top 5 coaching candidates that they've dwindled down to. Even rumors, if the Boston Celtics end up getting bounced here in the fashion that they are in right now, say they lose 3-1 or 4-1 in this series, they fired Joe Mazzulla. Is Nick Nurse waiting to see if that opportunity is available? Because that is a very tantalizing opportunity, right, up in Boston with that core. That's the question you have to ask yourself. How fast do you have to make that offer to Nick Nurse? How inclined is he to accepting an offer very quickly when he has all these teams looking at him? And then it leads you to the question, do you wait around until he makes a decision and lose out on other candidates? Yeah. So it can get very sticky. I would hope that they're in constant communication with him if that is the guy that they are ultimately looking towards. But it is a little nerve-wracking if you're a Nick Nurse guy like we are, and it feels like everybody has kind of clinged on to the idea of Nick Nurse. That's the guy we want. But usually that's a sign that there's a reason for that, right? There's a reason everybody wants Nick Nurse, because he just may well be the best coaching candidate on the market right now as far as reputation and status. So They have to act quickly, man. And you want to act quickly anyways, I would say. I know they want to take their time. You want to pick the right guy, but you have to act quickly in the sense of, getting your team together, understanding what you want as you go into the draft. I know that they don't have any draft picks, but as you go into the draft, as you go into free agency, you need to start having an idea of your scheme and what you're going to be running next year and what type of offense you're going to have, what type of defense you're going to have, and what type of players you're going to be targeting, because the Sixers, half their team is leaving in free agency. They're available in free agency. So they're going to have to go out and get guys that fit this new coaching hires game plan and the way they want to run their team. So those decisions do have to be made, quickly anyways, in a sense. So hopefully soon, man. That's what
I think that's another important thing.
Drop soon on Nurse, then I'm worried he's probably not going to be the selection, whether he picks us or we don't pick him, whatever the case may be.
I think that's another important point is the fact that we spoke on this probably the day after Doc Rivers was fired or 2 days after, right on the show, basically how important is it to bring in your guy soon enough? And how important is it to bring in a guy that has pull around the league and has relationships with players and throughout, because when you get into free agency, we're talking about Frank Vogel being boring to us. Is Frank Vogel a boring hire to other role players and guys that might be looking to come to play next to Joel Embiid and James Harden, but they're like, I really have no interest in playing for this head coach. What is this head coach going to do for me? How do I fit into his scheme, into his rotation? Whereas if you brought in a Mike Budenholzer, a Nick Nurse, a Monty Williams, blah, 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 that can draw eyes, that can bring in, free agents, right? So I think that's another factor the Sixers have to take into account. And I mean, they have over a month to get this done, obviously, and they'll have their coaching hire by then. But listen, we know that tampering is frowned upon and you're not technically allowed to do it. Guys are already getting a sense of where they would like to go and what opportunities lie ahead. And if you're the Sixers and they're waiting, and it's June 15th, you might have a problem of convincing some guys to come here on June 30th.
You wouldn't have that hardened smoke if tampering wasn't happening, right?
Yeah.
Let's
move on.
I would ask you though.
Yeah,
I would ask you this though. Of the teams that are left, who's the team? If you were Nick Nurse and you have your selection of these teams that are fielding you, which core would you want to work with or build upon?
It's tough, man. It really is, because obviously, I'm going to try to put bias aside here, but you cannot ignore the fact that, yes, while Joel Embiid disappointed all of us in game 6 and 7, and we have our own question marks about him in the postseason moving forward, you can't deny the top 5 dominant, top 3 dominant player, the MVP that he is, and that's going to bring eyeballs to this head coaching vacancy, right? I mean, also the James Harden situation, young talent like Tyrese Maxey. So the Sixers have a very strong argument to be made here. Yeah. You look at the Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis Antetokounmpo and the rest of their squad, but Chris Middleton's another year older. He might be leaving. Drew Holiday. What are you going to do with him? And then, you talk about the whole team is getting up there in age. Where do they move forward? Now, obviously, they have free agency to fix things like that, as do all the teams, but you have the Bucks with their own issues, and then you have the Suns, right? I mean, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, if they bring back Chris Paul or not, right? Or he's supposed to be back. But depth, like, what do you want to do with that team? It's an aging team, right? If you're a head coach, are you really going to sign on for an opportunity for 2 years as a window to win a championship? Right. Maybe you do. Maybe you look at the fact of that core and you see what you can do with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, and you go, sign me up. Let's go win a ring in the next 2 years. Yeah. Or maybe you say you need more stability. Out of those 3 teams, I'm going to take my bias aside. I'm going to say Milwaukee 1. I'll go Philly 2, and I'll go Phoenix 3, simply because of the window. Maybe I'm looking too much into that, but I look at the fact of Kevin Durant's age and Chris Paul's age and the lack of depth. And if you're a head coach, you're probably looking for what? At least a 4-year deal. Most coaches get around 5, right? You're looking for a 4 or 5 year deal, when in reality you might only have a year and a half to 2 in this place. I think that would probably weigh on some guys.
Yeah, no, I think you made great points there. And I would honestly, I go back and forth between Milwaukee and Philadelphia. Obviously, having Giannis in his prime, that's
Right.
a key there, right? You look at the other teams. Yes, the Suns have Devin Booker. He's also in his prime as well, but Giannis is better than
Right.
Devin Booker in my opinion. So, yeah, I would hold the Bucks over them right now. And like you said, that gives you maybe a 1.5 year type of window with the Phoenix Suns. And mind you, you may get your ring there. You may.
Right.
But if you're
But
looking
you are
for
rolling the
stability
dice, and you are
and
rolling the
long
dice on
term,
those guys staying healthy as well.
exactly. Like if KD retires after 2 more seasons, then you're probably done in Phoenix, right? Like
Right.
everything's over. Like that's the way I would be looking at that. And the one key thing here, and it depends how you weigh Tyrese Maxey, but the Sixers have the one young potential star, right?
Right.
The Bucks don't have anything like a Tyrese Maxey. The Suns don't have anything like a Tyrese Maxey. Tyrese Maxey is that light at the end of the tunnel that maybe just maybe after Embiid's prime we can build around Maxey. Like maybe. And just from that sense it gives you a little bit more stability going forward into the future. But I would say this, man, it really depends for the Sixers cuz there's something with the Sixers where it would be tantalizing to like put the pieces together and really see if I could get this thing to work because
Exactly.
Brett Brown couldn't get it, past the second round. Doc Rivers couldn't get it past the second round, but the pieces are there. We know the pieces are there to win. Can I put these things together and get this team to the next level? And I think that would be a huge accomplishment compared to the Suns who have already been to the finals recently, the Bucks who have won the championship recently. So you kind of make your own mark with the Sixers as well. I don't know. It's interesting. As long as Daryl Morey has a plan, I think that would be the biggest thing. Like if Harden doesn't sign back, what is the plan, Daryl Morey?
Yeah.
Because I can't go into next season being screwed and having my reputation on the line based on a lot of what ifs and question marks.
Exactly. And it's funny. You're going through that scenario of Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey and the predecessors here in Doc and Brett.
Right.
The thing that popped in my head was, are you built for this city? And I can't help but go back to our initial conversation with Frank Vogel. Like, bro, does Frank Vogel scream Philadelphia at all to you? Does he scream the personality to be able to handle this fan base and handle the media here and all of those duties?
He would.
It doesn't seem like it, right?
He would start the job with like 2 strikes out already. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you would start the job under the pressure regardless because people would not be high on this hiring. Whether it's right or wrong, people would be very down on this hiring.
And whether this roster is going to be championship ready, the bottom line is in the Joel Embiid era, you are still at that hump of anything less than an Eastern Conference Finals is not good enough. It is a failure. So you have that pressure on you as well, right? So, no, I completely agree with you. I think that's going to play kind of a big role in these coaching hires is, can you get the Sixers over this hump, and how attractive is that to you? How attractive is the city of Philadelphia and the passionate fan base? They all have passionate fan bases, and you obviously you see it throughout their playoff runs, what Milwaukee can be like and what Phoenix can be like. But as you mentioned, like Phoenix was just there. Milwaukee just won one against Phoenix.
Do you want to?
Are you attracted to the idea of getting that new team, that new organization there? And honestly, man, when you're talking like organization, like the Sixers are one of the, all-time type of organizations. Like they don't have the winning like Boston and the Lakers and whatever, but they are one of those original teams that you go back to in the 70s and the 80s, where you're like, they're a historic franchise, right?
Exactly. They're in that echelon of the Knicks, the Lakers, the Celtics. Right.
They just don't have the winning to go along with it.
Exactly. But I would say, that's the thing about this job that I would find it tantalizing if I was a head coach, especially a guy like Nick Nurse, man, where you won a championship with Toronto. You could go to Phoenix and win a championship, but is that your goal? You know what I mean? Or do you want some stability? He's a little younger. I think you come to Philadelphia, if he was able to say, get the Sixers past the second round somehow and become the first coach to do that in however long, right? Since 2001 with Allen Iverson. it's not Embiid that's going to get that credit for getting past the second round. It's
Right.
Nick Nurse. It's going to, or
Right.
whoever the coach is going to
Dude,
get
can
that credit.
to wrap this up, I just can't put a bigger exclamation point on how much I want Nick Nurse to be the next head coach of this team. And I know we spoke on all the reasons why before, and we touched on this. You're talking about him and Joel, and we talked about who can get the most out of Maxey, and bringing James back. Dude, there is something there. I promise you, there's something there for me with Nick and Joel.
Yeah,
and those two figuring it out, having one of the head coaches.
Smart.
Remember how happy we were when we first brought in Al Horford? Yeah, and it was you can't beat them, join them, and like we couldn't. Joel had his struggles against Al Horford, right? So you bring in Al, a pair next to him, he can learn from him. It didn't necessarily work, right? It didn't work.
Yeah.
Nick is one of those coaches. Toronto and Boston were the two teams earlier in his career that gave Joel fits on the offensive end. If he knows somewhat how to limit Joel, what do you think he can unleash offensively and adjustment-wise for Joel when teams throw all these different looks at him? That's just something I'm really excited for. One last quick thing to hit on before we move on to the Philadelphia Phillies here. Brian Windhorst came out with a statement yesterday that he believes all of these rumors, all of the smoke surrounding James Harden's future and going back to Houston is just that. It is smoke. They are rumors. They are leaks to drive up the price and try to get the most out of Philadelphia for James Harden, even if it's not a max contract, just getting the most out of Philly that he could possibly get. What do you make of that statement by Windhorst?
It would make sense. I mean, it would make sense overall from James Harden's standpoint. It would make a lot more sense than him actually wanting to go back to Houston. I mean, if the stuff that Chile put in the comments a couple of days ago on the show about him and his mother being sick, and that being the reason that he wants to go back to the Houston area just to be around his family and his mom, you get that, right? If that's real, then that is what it is. That's more than enough reason, I would say, to go and make that decision to go back home. But from a basketball standpoint, it makes zero sense to go back to Houston. I get it. They have a lot of young talent down there. They could, maybe make a play-in tournament with James Harden.
Did you hear Jalen Green's comments on the Paul George podcast?
I did. Basically saying, Paul George put it out there. He said
he agreed with it.
But it's the same thing we discussed with Maxey. Like, there is a balance. Now, the Sixers are in a different situation because they have Joel Embiid. They're in a situation where they are chasing a championship, whereas the Rockets, what is their goal right now? And what would be the goal if you bring in James Harden? You're not chasing a championship. You're just trying to develop your players. And for a guy like James Harden, who just said, I want the freedom to be myself and be the star that I am, if he really said that ultimately, then that means that Jalen Green is not touching the rock as much as he should be. And that's the same thing we have to balance out with Harden and Tyrese Maxey themselves. So I get it from Jalen Green's standpoint. I would say, with all this smoke, it's been hovering since around Christmas when it first dropped. And it would make a ton of sense if this was just to get the steam rolling on a contract with Philly, right? You want to force Philly. I gave you a pay cut last year. If Daryl Morey's saying, hey, man, we didn't finish out the playoffs very strong, don't want to give you a max. That's where the negotiating comes in. That's where the smoke comes from. We know Harden's camp is very good at it with getting rumors out into the air and really making things get going, right? Get things rolling. So it would make sense more if that was the case than him actually wanting to go to Houston and ready to make that move.
Yeah. No, I guess we're going to find out in the coming weeks here, man. We're almost into June, so it's definitely going to be an exciting offseason. Obviously, we're going to continue to talk Sixers here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the Phaithful Fanatic Show. But let's transition over to the second part of our show, and that is our Philadelphia Phillies, who currently, Scotty, sit in fourth place of the National League East, 22-26 on the young season. They were 21-29, 22-29 when they fired and relieved Joe Girardi of his coaching duties last season. And now here is the conversation sparked around Rob Thompson and Rob Thompson potentially not being the guy. And, we need another coaching change. And obviously I think that's nonsense. And we get into all the reasons why, but Scotty, man, I know we haven't talked a lot about them. I know we were so in the Sixers mode that we haven't even done a lot of the Phillies pregame lives. And we will get back to that over the course of the summer for all of you guys. But I could not be more, again, underwhelmed, exhausted, fatigued, not just in the Philly sports landscape, but specifically with our Phillies right now, man. And here's the frustrating part about it. I don't know what needs to be fixed. And that's why I relieve pressure from Rob Thompson. There's nothing I can point to right now that I can say the manager is doing wrong, that I can say he needs to fix this, he needs to do that. And I know some people's rebuttals will be, well, the team's not playing. Stop. Like, did you watch the postseason run last year? Like, just because things have gone and gotten tough in the first month and a half, 2 months of the season, does not mean that the team is not playing for Rob Thompson. They do not believe in Rob Thompson as their manager. What I mean by nothing he can do is this. For whatever reason, this lineup, adding Trey Turner, getting Bryce Harper back, who has not missed a beat since coming back early from Tommy John surgery. This lineup that was constructed to do what they did in the postseason last year is on a major, major struggle bus right now, dude. And it starts at the top. You have two guys right now for me consistently hitting, and that is Bryce since he's come back. I mean, he's hitting 328 since he's returned. Okay. He has 6 RBIs. He's walked 10 times and only 20 strikeouts. Okay. And then you have Nick, who has come down a little bit, but Nick Castellanos is still hitting 296. He's floating right around that 300 mark. Obviously, Bryce walked yesterday. Nick rips a double to the left corner. Nick Castellanos is still coming up with timely hits. He's still been one of their more consistent hitters. But everybody else has either continued to struggle from the beginning of the season or has come back down to earth a little bit. Bryson Stott is now down to 283. And it's not bad. 283 for a season average is not bad at all. But what I'm saying is when you start at 375 for the first 3 weeks of the season to dip to 283, there's been a little bit of a struggle, right?
Yeah.
You have Alec Boehm down to 260. Kyle Schwarber, listen, the power numbers, I get it. The Schwarbomb's cool. 173, Scotty. Brandon Marsh, right? He was Mr. OPS. He was Mr. Statistical Leader. 262. And then we get to our focal point here in the lineup of Mr. Trey Turner, who, when I talk about Trey Turner right now, I need a little spoiler, a little teaser for everybody. This is not the Trey Turner you're going to continue to see. Like, you have 10 more years of Trey Turner. You are going to get all-star, Hall of Fame level type of play out of this man moving forward. But right now, he is in some sort of slump that I can't figure out. He is hitting 251. He is getting booed at Citizens Bank Park right now. Scotty, he has 57 strikeouts. Kyle Schwarber has 59. We know Kyle Schwarber strikes out a lot. Trey Turner has 57 strikeouts to 11 walks. Okay? Schwarber's walked 31 times with 59 strikeouts. Turner has 11 with 57. I mentioned how Bryce Harper has 6 RBIs. He's only played in 18 games. Trey Turner's played in 47. He has 11 RBIs. Trey Turner doesn't even lead this team in stolen bases, Scotty. I watch this man get up, whether it's to lead off an inning or whether it's with two runners on in scoring position and 2 outs. Non-competitive at-bats. Non-competitive swing after swing after swing. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the pressure of the new scenery. I don't know. But I couldn't imagine there's no more pressure in the world than playing on the world stage with the best of the best and you outshining the best of the best for America. How did that go a week before the season to this? This lineup continues to not hit with runners in scoring position at a historic clip. The starters.
Amazing.
Oh, my God. Zach Wheeler has a team high ERA. It's over a 4.10. No, like I'm being.
I mean, you're naming everything that's wrong with the squad. We have diagnosed it here.
Like,
this is a problem.
Bro, I know ERA it can be a flawed stat to some extent. And I know it's because of the extreme highs and lows that Gregory Soto and Sir Anthony Dominguez have had this year. But my God, Gregory Soto a 4.6 ERA, Sir Anthony Dominguez a 4.2 ERA, Craig Kimbrell a 6.3 ERA. I'm giving myself a headache. Nothing can go right for this team.
You can't even bail the players out with these numbers and this type of performance by saying that Rob Thompson has to go.
That's what I'm saying. What do you want Rob Thompson to do, right? Yes, are there times where the lineup at the back end still frustrates you? Here and there, sure. But, I mean, Scotty, he can't make the guys hit with runners in scoring position.
You have to perform.
He can't make Taijuan Walker or Zach or Aaron Nola or Ranger Suarez pitch 5 strong innings.
And we're trying to not overreact because obviously you have a lot of moving pieces with Bryce coming, but Bryce isn't the problem. He's come back and fit seamlessly. So that's once again not an excuse. So we got to get Bryce back in the flow. That's not the case. Ranger Suarez, yeah, of course you need to get him in the flow, but this comes down to the players, the guys that you just named, Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola,
all the stars.
This is where all the money's at. Like, obviously, Aaron Nola wants a new contract, bro. You got to earn that shit. Like, he's not going to get paid like an ace with the performance that he's putting on this season so far, man. And it would take a huge turnaround at this point, right? So when you look at all of the guys, Kyle Schwarber, this is a guy, I asked you about at the beginning of the season.
I mean, 173, Scotty.
173? Is he about to retire? Like, what is going on? Like, what is going on, my man? Like, these are the big name guys on the team. And yes, Bohm and Stott, they've came back down to earth, but they were playing so up
well above their means
to try to give you time to get going, right? They tried to give Trey Turner and Kyle Schwarber time to get going and get running, and they just haven't been able to fulfill it. Right. Now, obviously, you hope Bohm and Stott are able to get their numbers back up. They probably won't get back up to where they were at the beginning of the season, but they can get their numbers back up and start to balance this thing. But it's not going to balance out until the names do what they're supposed to in this lineup and in the pitching staff. It's not just the batting, right? Obviously, the runners in scoring, they were 1 for 6 yesterday. Didn't get a chance to look at the game before that, but it's been a running trend this season.
It was rough yet again,
no
man.
Timely hitting.
I can't get over how much wrong I can point to, how many negatives I can point to right
wrong
now.
And there's still only 4 games under 500, excuse me.
Right. So. Yeah. Like, dude, they're only 7 games out, 4 games under 500. Like, there's 116 games, 114 games or whatever left to play. Like, it is nowhere near panic time. But I'm just saying, like, dude, I'm going to try to put this in, like, from game to game. Yeah. I don't know if the issue is going to be the pitching or the hitting. I don't know if they're going to hit with runners in scoring position. I don't know if they're going to get a no-hit bid into the 8th. I don't know if Aaron Nola is going to have a strong outing, but then Gregory Soto is going to give up 4 runs. I don't know if Taijuan Walker is going to get out of the first inning. Like last night, dude, they come back down 3-1, and Alec Boehm rips a 2-out RBI single up the middle. It's 3-3. The very next inning, it's 4-3. The very next, Sir Anthony comes in and doesn't record an out. The inconsistency right now, that's what's too much to overcome right now, man. And you mentioned guys like Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler and hell, Taijuan Walker, who got paid to come here for 4 years. That's what's rubbing me the wrong way. It's like, dude, Taijuan Walker gives you a very solid start on 3 days rest. The first time in his career he's pitched on 3 days rest. Got you through 5 innings, right? No hit or no run or 1-run ball. He was phenomenal in that win. But then he might come out and get yanked in the 3rd next start. Aaron Nola, what was that? Oh man, were they in? Yeah, they were in Houston when he got through 8 and 1-run ball in 8 in a Phillies win against the Astros a couple weeks ago. Oh, there's Knowles. Knowles is back. The next game, I don't even believe he gets to the 5th, Scotty. They are so unbelievably consistently inconsistent. Yeah. And I can't wrap my mind around why. Why can this lineup not produce runs with runners in scoring position? You are more talented than any lineup on paper that I can see.
Makes no sense, man.
Dude, nothing is more frustrating, okay? Nothing is more frustrating than watching. I need to pull this up, okay? Because
I was gonna say it's astounding because there's teams in baseball where they have a really good pitching staff and they can control games with their pitching staff and they win games that way, right? Then you have other teams that just have a nice lineup that can put runs on the board, and it's like the Phillies just can't they have no stability, right? They're not a run scoring team. They're not a team with a great pitching staff. They're just a team that fluctuates. You don't know what you're going to get out of this mystery bag called the Philadelphia Phillies on a given night. So
because
it's like you said, you need stability on some front. Like are your aces going to be aces the rest of the season and give you stability from a pitching standpoint? Or is your lineup going to give you runs consistently? Can you get up over 4 runs a game, right? Like these type of things that I'm looking at, and it's just like they're not being consistently great at anything. They don't have an identity, and that's a major problem in my opinion. Now, I know it's a long season. I'm trying not to overreact as I'm talking myself through this because it's an identity crisis, and I'm like, that is a major problem ultimately. But
no, and I do agree with D-Rab. It is a marathon, not a sprint, and the season is not over before June 1st hits. Hell, Bryce Harper wasn't even supposed to be back yet.
Yeah, fair.
But I will there is something to year after year starting like this and building losing tendencies and losing mentalities. That's rubbing me the wrong way. Like, dude, I just wanted to bring this lineup up because, again, the Texas Rangers are 30-18, and I thought they'd be better, right, than they were last year. And we saw firsthand when they swept us on the opening series that they are better. They don't even have DeGrom healthy this year. I know that their staff is good, but Scotty, I mean, my God, with this lineup, that it might even be number 1 in runs per game, but they're definitely top 5 in runs per game in the Texas Rangers. Marcus Semien and Corey Seager are 2 very good hitters, 2 all-stars at the top of their lineup. Congrats. Okay. Nathaniel Lau, Adolis Garcia, Josh, I can't even speak, Josh Young, Jonah Heim, Robbie Grossman, Ezekiel Duran, Leody Taveras. I could not tell you who 5 or 6 of those 9 players were before the season started. And they are top 5 in runs per game. But the Philadelphia Phillies, with Bryce Harper back and Trey Turner and Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos and JT Realmuto and Alec Boehm and Bryson Stott playing the way he has, can't hit with runners in scoring position. And this is also true. You cannot win the season this early, but you can play yourself out of it.
Yeah.
The problem is this is a very important stretch they are up against, man, because you have one more game against Arizona, who you've now lost the series to. But, Scotty, I believe
10 straight against NL East opponents.
And back-to-back series are on the road with
Atlanta,
the Braves. They're all on the road, actually, but they start with Atlanta. And then you go to New York. Scotty, my point to this comment right here is that they could play themselves out of contention over the next week.
Yeah.
Like, you are 4 games under 500 right now. I can't say it's out of the realm of possibility that they go 1-5 over the right with the way they're playing against these 2 coming. I'm not saying they're going to. But my point is,
1-3
this
against the
spot
Braves.
right here against these two opponents has to be the changing point in the season right now, because you're at a very fine line, 22 and 26, 7 games out of first place. You're at a very thin line right now of staying afloat and falling completely out of contention. I mean, if you go 1-5, dude, we're talking about 23 and 31.
Now you're looking a lot closer to the Nationals than you are to the Braves.
Right.
They already are a lot closer to the Nationals than the Braves, but it'll be significant at that point. Yeah, the Braves and the Mets could ultimately sink the Phillies really early.
And I'll tell you what, man, the bank has been rocking. Dude, Citizens Bank Park has been sold out or nearly sold
Tickets
out.
are expensive as hell.
All season long right now. You want to talk about keeping the fans' attention for the summer?
Yeah.
You go on the road for 9 straight or 10 straight right now, okay?
Yeah.
All against division rivals. You're underperforming. You better hope you come back home still afloat. Because if not, if you come back home 25 and 34, you're not going to see 45,000 people at Citizens Bank Park this summer.
People are going to be migrating over to Eagles football very early.
Yeah. So these next 10, 11 games are very, very important for the Phillies. And I am never normally the kind of guy that at the end of May, early June starts to get worked up about their record, but they need to figure it out over the next 10. And the Mets have started to figure it out. The Mets were on as big a struggle bus as we were, but the Mets have started to figure it out. The Braves have come back. That's the weird thing to me, man. The Braves were running away with this division, and obviously it's a long season. I think the Braves are still the best team in this division, obviously, but like they were running away with it. We're 4 games under 500, lost 7 of 9, and we're still somehow only 7 games out of first place. Like, I know that sounds like a lot, but I'm surprised we're not 12 games back right now.
Well, it's one of those situations. You're only 7 games back. If you can beat the Diamondbacks tonight, maybe go 2 for 4 against the Braves or 3 for 4 against the Braves, you're right back in the heat of it. But at this point, with the way they're playing right now, that's a lot to ask them to go, 3 for 4, 2 for 4 at least against the Braves.
I didn't even realize
isn't asking a lot though. But I
didn't even realize it was a 4-game series.
Yeah, it's a 4-game series, and then you got
shit.
3 against the Mets. So that's a 7-game stretch right there against NL East, top class opponents. And then you get the Washington Nationals, a 3-game stretch after that, which is another NL East opponent. Obviously, they're at the bottom.
I'll say this.
Still NL East, right?
To wrap up the show, we're going to start getting back into pregame lives this upcoming week. So
bring the energy. We got to get the Phillies going again, man.
Yep. Here's 2 keys that I'm going to give the Philadelphia Phillies on each side of the ball right now. And it's little things. So, A, you need good starting pitching.
Yeah.
Against the Braves, against the Mets, you need good start. You cannot afford to get into the bullpen through 3 2/3, through 4 innings, blah, blah, blah. You need good starting pitching, and you need timely hitting, Scotty. That's all. I'm not asking you to score 8 runs a ball game. I'm asking for your starters to show up and get you through at least 5. And I'm asking to average between 4 and 5 runs and come up with timely hits with runners in scoring position later on in a ball game or whenever throughout the ball game. Because if you do not do that against the Atlanta Braves, if you do go 1 for 12 with runners in scoring position, you are going to get blown the F out. Because the Atlanta Braves are not going to go 1 for 12 with runners in scoring position. Good starting pitching plus timely hitting with runners on, and the Phillies can turn this ship around. Guys, that is going to wrap up this Wednesday edition of the Phaithful Fanatics Show. As always, don't forget to check out our friends over at Manscaped. Head on over to manscaped.com and use promo code DSM at checkout for 20% off plus free shipping. Again, that is code DSM, all capital letters, for 20% off your entire order plus free shipping over at manscaped.com. Tell them that your friends over at DSM sent you. Your balls will certainly thank you. For myself, for Scotty, for DSM Media, have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Happy hump day.
And Philadelphia has it.